Ethan Beaumont stood in the bathroom of a Motel 6, staring at his reflection in a cracked mirror. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his unshaven face. 42 years old. Once worth $3 billion. Now counting quarters to afford instant coffee from the vending machine down the hall. He adjusted the collar of his only remaining suit, a charcoal Tom Ford he'd worn to a tech conference 3 years ago, back when his renewable energy company, Beacon Solar Industries, was being called the future of clean power in America. The suit still fit, but it hung differently now. He'd lost 20 pounds in the 6 months since the divorce became final. Since everything fell apart. His phone, a budget Android he'd bought at a gas station after they repossessed his iPhone, showed 6:47 a.m. The bankruptcy hearing was at 9. 2 hours and 13 minutes until he would officially sign away the last fragments of his dignity. Ethan picked up the manila folder from the cigarette-burned nightstand. Inside were the documents his court-appointed attorney had sent over, a list of debts totaling $847 million, asset seizures, patent transfers, and a settlement agreement that would absolve him of criminal charges in exchange for accepting full responsibility for the accounting fraud that had supposedly brought down his company. Fraud he didn't commit. Fraud that had been carefully orchestrated by people he'd trusted. His ex-wife, Victoria Beaumont, now Victoria Ashford again, had been thorough. She'd married him when Beacon Solar was just an idea sketched on napkins in their graduate school apartment. She'd smiled beside him at every press conference, every investor meeting, every magazine cover shoot. Power couple revolutionizing energy, Forbes had called them. What Ethan hadn't known was that Victoria had spent the last 3 years of their marriage conducting her own kind of revolution. While he'd been focused on scaling the business, she'd been quietly recruiting board members to her side. Collecting evidence she would later distort. Having an affair with Marcus Chen, the corporate attorney who would eventually represent her in the divorce. The divorce itself had been brutal, 18 months of legal warfare that drained his focus and his bank accounts. But Ethan had survived it. He'd agreed to split the assets fairly. He'd been ready to rebuild. Then came the SEC investigation. Suddenly, millions of dollars were missing from corporate accounts. Fabricated emails appeared, showing Ethan authorizing illegal transfers. Offshore accounts were discovered in his name, accounts he'd never opened. The board voted unanimously to remove him as CEO. The banks froze his personal assets pending investigation. His lawyers abandoned him when his retainer checks bounced. The criminal trial had been a public execution. Victoria testified against him, tears streaming down her professionally made-up face, describing how she discovered his secret financial crimes, and how it had broken her heart to realize the man she married was a fraud. The jury hadn't fully believed the prosecution. The evidence was circumstantial enough that Ethan avoided prison. But the civil cases buried him. Investors sued. Creditors seized everything. His reputation was destroyed beyond repair. And through it all, Ethan had known the truth. Victoria, Marcus, and at least 3 board members had orchestrated everything. They'd stolen from the company and framed him for it. They'd used the divorce as cover to position themselves to take over Beacon Solar, which now, renamed Ashford Energy Solutions, was worth over $4 billion under Victoria's leadership. But knowing the truth and proving it were 2 different things. Ethan had no evidence. No resources. No allies. He closed the folder and tucked it under his arm. Time to go face the end. The Franklin County Courthouse was a massive stone building that had witnessed a century of legal dramas. Ethan climbed the steps slowly, aware of the irony that he'd once donated $2 million to renovate this very building. There had been a plaque with his name on it in the lobby. He wondered if they'd taken it down. Inside, the marble floors echoed with footsteps. Lawyers in expensive suits brushed past him without recognition. Why would they? The Ethan Beaumont they knew wore custom Italian shoes and commanded attention when he entered a room. This hollow-eyed man in an outdated suit was invisible. Courtroom 7B. 3rd floor. Ethan took the elevator, sharing it with a young woman in a simple gray dress who clutched a leather portfolio against her chest like a shield. She had dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and behind wire-rimmed glasses, her eyes darted nervously to the floor numbers as they climbed. When the doors opened on the third floor, she practically fled into the hallway. The corridor outside courtroom 7B was lined with wooden benches. Ethan's court-appointed attorney, a tired-looking man named Gerald Finch, sat reviewing papers. "Morning, Ethan," Gerald said without looking up. "We're scheduled for 9:15. Should be quick. Sign the documents, answer a few questions from the judge, and you're done." "Done," Ethan repeated. The word tasted like ash. "I know this isn't easy," Gerald said, finally meeting his eyes. "But you're getting a fresh start. The criminal charges are dismissed. You can rebuild." "Rebuild with what?" Ethan wanted to ask. "I'm 42 years old with a destroyed reputation and no assets. Every door in every industry I know is permanently closed to me." But he just nodded. Gerald meant well. The man was handling this case pro bono as a favor to a mutual friend. He'd done his best with an impossible situation. "Is Victoria here?" Ethan asked. "She doesn't have to be. This is your bankruptcy proceeding, not hers." Gerald hesitated. "But Marcus Chen is here. He's representing Ashford Energy Solutions' interest in the intellectual property transfers." Of course he was. Marcus wanted to watch Ethan's final humiliation in person. The courtroom doors opened, and people began filing in. Ethan spotted Marcus immediately, tall, impeccably dressed in a navy suit, his dark hair styled perfectly. He was talking to two other attorneys, laughing about something. When his gaze landed on Ethan, the laughter didn't fade. If anything, his smile widened. Ethan forced himself to look away. He would not give Marcus the satisfaction of seeing him break. That's when he noticed her again. The young woman from the elevator. She was sitting at a side table, organizing documents for one of the attorneys. A paralegal, Ethan realized. She worked for someone here. She was arranging papers with meticulous precision, her movements careful and practiced. But her hands were trembling slightly. And she kept glancing toward Marcus Chen's table with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. Fear? Anger? Both? All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. Everyone stood as the judge entered, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who had a reputation for running an efficient courtroom. She settled into her chair and began reviewing the docket. Case number 47, BK 8832. In the matter of Ethan Beaumont's Chapter 7 bankruptcy petition. Judge Morrison looked up. "Mr. Beaumont, you're present. Mr. Finch, is your client ready to proceed?" Gerald stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Good. Let's." "Your Honor." The voice was quiet but clear. Everyone turned. The young paralegal had stood up. Her face was pale, but her jaw was set with determination. "Yes?" Judge Morrison frowned. "Who are you?" "Mara Linwood, Your Honor. I'm a paralegal with Chen and Associates." She swallowed hard. "I need to present evidence of procedural irregularity in this case." Marcus Chen was on his feet instantly. "Your Honor, Ms. Linwood is speaking out of turn. She has no authority to." "I have documents that prove fraud, Your Honor." Mara's voice was stronger now, though Ethan could see her hands shaking as she lifted the portfolio. "Documents that show Mr. Beaumont's assets were illegally seized through falsified divorce settlement terms." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Gerald grabbed Ethan's arm. "Do you know her?" Ethan shook his head, unable to speak. His heart was pounding. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "Order. Ms. Linwood, this is highly irregular. You're not an attorney of record in this case." "I know, Your Honor. But I discovered this evidence while preparing files for this hearing, and I cannot in good conscience allow these proceedings to continue without bringing it to your attention." Mara took a breath. "There is a clause buried in the Beaumont divorce settlement. Paragraph 47, subsection C. It grants Mrs. Beaumont, now Ms. Ashford, power of attorney over Mr. Beaumont's corporate patent portfolio, effective immediately upon divorce finalization. That's not unusual in high-asset divorces, Gerald interjected. It would be, if it were legitimate, Mara continued. But this clause wasn't in the original settlement agreement that both parties signed. It was added later, before the final filing. The addition was made to look like a simple formatting change, but it fundamentally altered the legal ownership of Beacon Solar's core technology. Marcus was moving toward Mara now, his face furious. Your Honor, this is completely inappropriate. Ms. Linwood is clearly acting without authorization from our firm. Because you knew about this, Mr. Chen. Mara's voice didn't rise, but it cut through the noise. Your signature is on the amended filing. You personally submitted the altered document to the court. Judge Morrison's expression had gone from annoyed to very interested. Ms. Linwood, are you accusing an officer of this court of filing fraudulent documents? I'm presenting evidence, Your Honor. And I'm requesting that you review it before this hearing proceeds. Mara looked directly at Ethan for the first time. Her eyes behind those glasses were steady and clear. Mr. Beaumont lost his company because of an illegal clause. He's about to lose everything else because no one noticed the fraud buried in his own divorce papers. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Judge Morrison set down her pen. Approached the bench. All attorneys, and Ms. Linwood. What happened next blurred in Ethan's memory. Gerald pulled him aside to a corner of the courtroom while Mara, Marcus, and several other attorneys crowded around the judge's bench. Documents were passed back and forth. Marcus's voice rose at one point, sharp and angry, but Judge Morrison cut him off with a single look. Ethan couldn't hear the details, but he could see everything he needed to in body language. Marcus was panicking. The other attorneys looked confused and concerned. And Mara stood quietly in the center of it all, pointing to specific pages, explaining something with careful precision. After 20 minutes, Judge Morrison called a recess. I need to review these documents in chambers, she announced. This hearing is postponed until I can determine whether the evidence Ms. Linwood has presented has merit. Mr. Chen, you and your client will make yourselves available for questioning. Mr. Beaumont, you are not to leave the jurisdiction. We reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. The gavel came down. Ethan felt Gerald's hand on his shoulder, but he was staring at Mara. She had gathered her portfolio and was walking toward the exit, ignoring Marcus Chen's furious attempts to corner her. A bailiff intercepted Marcus, speaking to him in low tones. Security concerns, Ethan realized. They were keeping Marcus away from her. Gerald, I need to talk to her, Ethan said. I don't think that's wise right now. But Ethan was already moving. He caught up with Mara in the hallway just as she reached the elevators. Ms. Linwood. She turned, startled. Up close, Ethan could see she was younger than he'd first thought. Mid-20s, probably. And absolutely terrified, despite her courtroom composure. Mr. Beaumont. She clutched the portfolio tighter. I'm sorry, I should have approached you before the hearing, but I only found the documents last night, and I wasn't sure if you'd believe me, and... Stop. Please. Ethan held up his hands. I need to understand what just happened. What did you find? Mara glanced around nervously. The hallway was emptying as people filed into other courtrooms. Can we talk somewhere private? They found an empty conference room on the second floor. Mara spread documents across the table, printouts, highlighted passages, handwritten notes. Ethan recognized some of them, pages from his divorce settlement, patent transfer forms, corporate filing documents. I've been working for Chen and Associates for 2 years, Mara began, speaking quickly now. I do mostly administrative work, filing, document prep, research. I'm good at it. Maybe too good. I notice things other people don't. She pulled out 2 documents, side by side. This is your original divorce settlement, signed by both parties in June, 18 months ago. She pointed to the left page. This is the version filed with the court in August, 2 weeks later. She pointed to the right. To Ethan's eye, they looked identical. I don't see the difference, he admitted. Most people wouldn't. The changes are tiny, a few extra words here, a modified paragraph number there. But look at paragraph 47. She highlighted a section on the right document. This clause gives your ex-wife's legal team immediate control over your patent portfolio, effective the moment the divorce is finalized. It essentially means she could transfer ownership of Beacon Solar's core technology without your consent or knowledge. Ethan read the words, his throat tight. I never agreed to this. I know. Because it's not in the version you signed. Mara tapped the left document. In the original, paragraph 47 deals with stock options and retirement accounts. This other clause doesn't exist. Someone added it after you both signed, but before the final court filing. Marcus, Ethan breathed. Yes. And I can prove it. Mara pulled out another sheet. Every document filed with the court has a digital signature trail. The amended settlement was submitted from Marcus Chen's personal workstation at our firm. On August 3rd, at 11:47 p.m. He could claim it was an administrative correction. He could. Except I found the draft versions in our internal server. Mara's eyes flashed with something fierce. There are 11 draft versions of the amended paragraph. Marcus was workshopping the language, making it look as innocuous as possible while giving it maximum legal power. And in one of the early drafts, there's a comment thread. She pulled up a laptop from her bag and opened a document. Ethan leaned in. The comment was from an account labeled VA, make sure the timeline gives us immediate access to IP. We need to file the patent transfers before he realizes what's happening. Marcus Chen's response, done. He'll be dealing with the criminal investigation by then. Won't have resources to challenge. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the chest. They planned this. All of it. The SEC investigation. The corporate fraud charges, everything. Mara nodded. They needed you distracted and financially drained so you couldn't afford lawyers good enough to catch this. And it worked. Why? Ethan looked at her. Why are you showing me this? You work for Marcus. This could destroy your career. Mara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. When I was 17, my dad owned a small construction business. He had a partner he'd known since college. Trusted him completely. Then one day, the IRS showed up. Turns out the partner had been embezzling money and cooking the books to make it look like my dad was responsible. My dad lost everything. The business, our house, his reputation. The legal fees bankrupted us. She looked down at her hands. He died 2 years later. Heart attack. But I think it was really just being broken. He couldn't live with everyone thinking he was a thief. Mara met Ethan's eyes. I became a paralegal because I wanted to understand the law. To understand how someone could do that to another person and get away with it. And I swore that if I ever found evidence of that kind of fraud, would never stay silent. Ethan couldn't speak. This young woman, this stranger, was risking everything for him because of a promise she'd made to her dead father. Thank you, he finally managed. Mara. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. She started gathering the documents. Exposing the clause is just the beginning. We have to prove Victoria and Marcus orchestrated the entire fraud. We have to recover your assets. And we have to do it before they realize how much evidence I've copied. We? Mara smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face. You didn't think I'd give you this information and just walk away, did you? I'm already fired the moment Marcus figures out what I've done. Might as well make it count. She extended her hand. I'm in this with you, Mr. Beaumont. If you'll have me. Ethan took her hand. Her grip was firm despite the trembling he could still feel in her fingers. Call me Ethan, he said. And yes, I'll have you. They met in the public library. It was Mara's idea, somewhere with free Wi-Fi and enough ambient noise that their conversations wouldn't be overheard. Plus, as Mara pointed out, corporate lawyers didn't tend to spend much time in public libraries. Ethan spread everything across a corner table in the non-fiction section: Mara's evidence, his own files from the divorce and criminal trial, and the laptop Mara had bought using the last of her savings. She'd quit using her work computer the moment she decided to expose Marcus. Okay, she said, pulling up a spreadsheet. Let's map this out. We have proof of the fraudulent clause in your divorce settlement. That's our foundation. But we need to build a complete picture of the conspiracy. Ethan nodded. Over the past 3 days, they'd fallen into an easy working rhythm. Mara was brilliant with details, able to spot patterns and connections that Ethan missed. He provided the industry knowledge and understanding of how Beacon Solar's corporate structure had been dismantled. The SEC investigation is key, Ethan said. That's what distracted me while they were finalizing the patent transfers. We need to prove the investigation was based on fabricated evidence. Start with the anonymous tip, Mara suggested. The SEC said they opened the case based on information from a whistleblower. Who was it? They never revealed the source. But the tip would have included specific allegations. Details about which accounts showed irregularities, dates of supposed illegal transfers. Mara pulled up another document. I found the initial SEC complaint filing through a public records request. The whistleblower provided transaction records from accounts in the Cayman Islands. Ethan leaned in. I never had Cayman accounts. I know. But someone opened them in your name. Mara highlighted a section. Look at the dates. These accounts were created in March, 3 years ago. The same month you and Victoria legally separated. She had my social security number, access to all my personal documents. And Marcus has expertise in offshore asset protection. It's one of his specialties. Mara was typing rapidly now. If we can prove Marcus helped Victoria create these accounts and fake the transactions, we can show the SEC investigation was fraudulent from the start. How do we prove that? Mara bit her lip. I might have copies of Marcus's billing records from that time period. How much did you copy before you left his firm? A lot. She looked slightly guilty. I've been working there for 2 years. I have pretty high-level server access for a paralegal. Once I found the divorce clause and realized what it meant, I spent 3 days copying everything I could find related to your case and Victoria's accounts. That was incredibly risky. I know. But I also know how corporate law firms work. The moment they realize there's a problem, they start destroying evidence. I had one chance to grab everything, so I did. Ethan felt a surge of admiration. This quiet, nervous young woman had conducted a solo intelligence operation against one of the city's most powerful law firms. What else did you get? Emails between Marcus and Victoria going back 4 years. Phone records. Draft documents for the patent transfers. Financial records showing payments from Victoria's personal accounts to several of your former board members. Ethan froze. Payments to board members? Yes. Robert Hutchins, Linda Zhao, and Trevor Marks. They each received wire transfers ranging from $500,000 to $2 million, deposited into personal accounts between September and November of last year. Right when the board was voting to remove you as CEO. They were bribed. Ethan's voice was hollow. Rob, Linda, and Trevor. I hired Rob fresh out of Stanford. Linda and I wrote the first business plan together on her kitchen table. Trevor was my college roommate. Mara reached across the table and touched his hand. I'm sorry. He took a breath. Don't be. You just gave me their names. Now we can make them pay. They needed money to fight this war. Legal fees, investigation costs, living expenses. Ethan had nothing. Mara had maybe $3,000 in savings. They needed a miracle. Or they needed to make Victoria's team pay for their own downfall. Whistleblower rewards, Mara said suddenly. They were in her tiny apartment, a studio in a building that smelled like old carpet and disinfectant. She was making spaghetti while Ethan reviewed emails on the laptop. The SEC offers rewards to whistleblowers who provide information that leads to successful enforcement actions. Ethan looked up. The case against me is closed. But a new case against Victoria, Marcus, and Ashford Energy Solutions isn't. Mara turned off the stove. We have evidence of fraud, bribery, and money laundering. If we package it correctly and submit it to the SEC's whistleblower office, they'll investigate. And if that investigation leads to fines or penalties, we get a percentage of the recovery. That could take years. The submission doesn't. And the moment the SEC opens an investigation into Ashford Energy Solutions, everything changes. Suddenly Victoria is the one under scrutiny. Banks start asking questions. Investors get nervous. Stock prices drop. Ethan saw where she was going. It applies immediate pressure while we build the broader case. Exactly. Plus, whistleblower identities are protected. We can submit anonymously through an attorney. Victoria won't know it's us until we want her to know. They worked through the night, compiling evidence into a comprehensive whistleblower submission. Mara's paralegal training showed she knew exactly how to organize the material, which documents to include, how to write the allegations in precise legal language. By dawn, they had a 50-page submission with over 200 supporting documents. We need an attorney to file this, Mara said, rubbing her eyes. Someone who won't be connected to you. Someone Victoria's team won't see coming. I know someone. Ethan pulled out his budget phone. Catherine Ross. She's a securities law specialist who used to work for the SEC. She went into private practice 5 years ago, representing whistleblowers. She's good. And she hates corporate fraud. Will she believe us? Let's find out. Catherine Ross had an office in a converted brownstone downtown. She was in her 50s, with silver hair and sharp green eyes that reminded Ethan of Judge Morrison. She listened without interrupting as Ethan and Mara presented their evidence, occasionally making notes in a leather journal. When they finished, Catherine sat back. This is one of the most comprehensively documented fraud cases I've ever seen, she said. You two did this alone? Ms. Linwood did most of the investigative work, Ethan said. Catherine looked at Mara with new respect. You worked for Chen and Associates? Until 5 days ago, yes. And you copied all of this from their internal servers? Yes. That's potentially illegal. I know. Mara's voice was steady. But I discovered evidence of an ongoing crime. I had a legal and ethical obligation to preserve it. Catherine smiled. That's the right answer. And I happen to agree with you. She tapped the documents. This is solid. If even half of this is admissible, the SEC will have to investigate. I'll file the whistleblower submission this afternoon. What's the timeline? Ethan asked. The SEC will review it within 60 days. If they decide to pursue an investigation, they'll issue subpoenas and document requests to Ashford Energy Solutions within another 30 days. Figure 3 to 4 months before Victoria knows something's wrong. 3 to 4 months. Ethan felt a flicker of hope, followed immediately by doubt. Victoria will have that time to destroy evidence, he said. She'll try, Catherine agreed. But here's the thing about corporate fraud, it leaves traces everywhere. Emails are backed up on servers. Financial transactions are recorded by banks. Witnesses get nervous and start keeping insurance policies of their own. Once the SEC starts digging, they find things even the conspirators forgot they left behind. So we wait? You wait. And while you're waiting, I suggest you start thinking about what comes next. Catherine's expression grew serious. Exposing the fraud is step 1. But if you want to truly recover what you lost, you need to go after them in civil court. That means lawsuits against Victoria, Marcus, Chen and Associates, and every board member who participated in the conspiracy. I can't afford attorneys for multiple lawsuits. Not yet. But if the SEC case goes forward, you'll have leverage. Defendants in SEC enforcement actions tend to settle civil claims quickly to avoid additional legal exposure. Catherine leaned forward. Here's my advice: document everything that happens from this point forward. Record conversations if you can do so legally. Gather more evidence. Build your case so that when the moment comes, you're ready to strike all at once. Like we're preparing for war, Mara said quietly. Exactly like that. Catherine handed Ethan a business card. I'm filing this submission pro bono. Consider it my contribution to justice. But call me if you need anything else. And be careful. People who commit fraud at this level don't give up easily. It took 73 days. 73 days of Ethan working construction jobs under an assumed name to pay rent. 73 days of Mara applying for paralegal positions and getting rejected the moment potential employers called Chen and Associates for references. 73 days of waiting and wondering if Catherine's whistleblower submission had disappeared into a bureaucratic void. Then, on a Tuesday morning in late October, Victoria Ashford's world began to crack. The SEC announced an investigation into Ashford Energy Solutions for potential securities violations and financial irregularities. The press release was brief and formal. But the market's reaction was immediate. Ashford Energy Solutions stock dropped 23% in the first hour of trading. Ethan and Mara watched the news coverage from her apartment, barely breathing. "This is it," Mara whispered. On screen, a news anchor was interviewing a financial analyst. The timing of this investigation is particularly surprising given that Victoria Ashford just secured a $500 million deal with a consortium of European energy firms. Questions are now being raised about whether that deal will proceed. Ethan's phone rang. Catherine Ross. "You're watching?" she asked. "Yes." The SEC moved faster than I expected. They must have found something big in your evidence. They've already issued subpoenas to Ashford Energy Solutions, Chen and Associates, and 3 of your former board members. What happens now? Now Victoria's attorneys try to contain the damage. They'll be reviewing every document, every email, every transaction. And they'll be looking for the source of the SEC's information. Catherine paused. Be ready. She's going to figure out it was you eventually. Let her know, Ethan said. I'm not hiding anymore. But Victoria figured it out sooner than any of them expected. 2 days after the SEC announcement, Ethan returned to the motel where he'd been staying to find his room trashed. Someone had broken in, destroyed his few possessions, and spray-painted a message on the wall. Drop it or die. He stood in the doorway, phone in hand, deciding whether to call the police. Then his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You made a mistake, Ethan. I gave you a chance to disappear quietly. Now I'm going to destroy what's left of your life. And I'm going to start with that little paralegal who thinks she's so clever. V. Ethan's blood ran cold. He called Mara immediately. Don't go home, he said the moment she answered. Victoria knows. She's threatening you. I'm at the library. What happened? He told her about the motel room and the text. Oh my God. Mara's voice was shaking. Ethan, maybe we should stop. Go to the police with the threats. No. Ethan was surprised by the force in his own voice. That's what she wants. She wants us scared and running to the authorities so she can paint us as unstable, obsessed. We stick to the plan. But we need to be smarter about security. Where are you going to stay? She knows where you've been living. Ethan hesitated. Can I stay with you? Just until we figure something else out. There was a pause on the other end. Then, yes. Of course. I'll get some extra blankets for the couch. That night, Ethan lay on Mara's lumpy sofa, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of the city outside. In the bedroom, he could hear Mara moving around, unable to sleep. They'd escalated this war. And Victoria had shown she was willing to fight dirty, but for the first time since the bankruptcy hearing, Ethan didn't feel alone. He had an ally. A partner. Someone who believed in him enough to risk everything. He just hoped he could keep her safe. Robert Hutchins broke first. Rob had been Beacon Solar's CFO, a brilliant financial strategist who Ethan had trusted completely. When the SEC subpoenaed his personal financial records, Rob lasted exactly 11 days before his attorney called Catherine Ross to negotiate immunity. Ethan and Mara met Rob in a conference room at Catherine's office. Rob looked terrible, 20 pounds thinner, his expensive suit hanging loose, dark circles under his eyes. "I'm sorry," Rob said before anyone else could speak. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I didn't think it would go this far." "Tell us what happened," Catherine said. Rob explained it all. Victoria had approached him 2 years before the divorce, back when she and Ethan were still presenting a united front publicly. She'd told Rob she was concerned about Ethan's erratic behavior and his risky business decisions. She wanted Rob's help documenting everything, just in case she needed to protect the company. "I thought I was helping," Rob said miserably. "She made it sound like Ethan was having some kind of breakdown. She showed me emails that made it seem like he was planning to take the company in a dangerous direction. I believed her." "When did you realize she was lying?" Ethan asked. His voice was calm, but Mara could see his hands clenched under the table. "Not until it was too late. By the time I understood what she was really planning, I'd already signed documents, forwarded confidential information. She had enough to implicate me in corporate espionage. Then she offered me money to vote with her on the board." Rob looked directly at Ethan. "I took it. I'm not going to pretend I was forced. I took the money and I voted to remove you because I was scared and greedy and weak." "Did the others know?" Catherine asked. "Linda Zhao and Trevor Marks?" "Linda did. She and Victoria planned it together from the beginning." "Trevor? I'm not sure. He took the money, but I think he actually believed you were guilty." "And Marcus Chen?" "Marcus orchestrated everything. The offshore accounts, the fabricated emails, the timing of the SEC investigation. He's been Victoria's partner in this from day one. Maybe more than partner, I think they're engaged now." Ethan absorbed this information without expression. Then he said, "I want you to testify. Everything you just told us, you tell the SEC investigators. And you help us prove Linda and Trevor's involvement." "I will. I'll do whatever it takes." Rob's voice cracked. "I know I can't fix what I did. But I want to try." After Rob left, Catherine turned to Ethan and Mara. "This changes everything," she said. "Rob's testimony, combined with the documents you provided, gives us enough to prove a conspiracy. The SEC will likely bring criminal charges against Victoria and Marcus." "How long?" Ethan asked. 6 months, maybe less. They're moving fast." Ethan nodded slowly. "What about the civil case? Getting back Beacon Solar?" "That's trickier. Right now, Victoria legally owns the company. Even if we prove she obtained it through fraud, there are questions about whether you can reclaim a business that's been restructured and renamed." Catherine pulled out another file. "But there's an alternative. Instead of trying to take back Ashford Energy Solutions, we sue for damages equal to the company's value. With Rob's testimony, we can prove Victoria and Marcus conspired to defraud you of assets worth billions. A jury would award significant damages." "I don't want money," Ethan said. "I want them to lose everything the way I did. I want the world to know what they did." "Then we give that to you," Catherine said with a slight smile. "We expose them publicly, we strip them of their reputation, and we make sure they spend the next decade in legal hell." 3 months later, on a cold February evening, Mara made a discovery that would change everything. She and Ethan had developed a routine. Mornings were spent following up on leads from Rob's testimony. Afternoons, Ethan worked construction to pay bills while Mara continued digging through the evidence. Evenings, they reconvened at her apartment to strategize. But tonight, Mara had stayed at the library after Ethan left for his shift. She'd been reviewing Victoria's email correspondence from the year before the divorce, thousands of messages she'd barely skimmed before. Then she found it. A single email from Victoria to Marcus, dated 14 months before the divorce filing. The prenup is a problem. E's attorney put in clauses that protect the IP. We need to find another way to access the patents without triggering the prenup provisions. What if we separate first, make it look mutual, then manufacture grounds for the fraud investigation later? That way the business assets get frozen and we can renegotiate everything from scratch. Think it through and call me. Mara read it 3 times, her heart pounding. This email proved premeditation. Victoria hadn't just discovered an opportunity during the divorce, she'd planned the entire scheme more than a year in advance. Before there was any talk of separation. Before Ethan had any reason to suspect her. This was conspiracy on a level that would shock even the SEC investigators. Mara grabbed her phone to call Ethan, then froze. She'd heard something. Footsteps in the library's main corridor, which should have been empty. The library closed 30 minutes ago. She'd been so absorbed in her work that she hadn't noticed the lights dimming, the announcement of closing time. Slowly, Mara closed the laptop and slipped it into her bag. The footsteps were getting closer. Heavy boots on tile floor. More than one person. She stood, trying to stay calm. Probably just security doing a final sweep. But then she heard the voice, "She's here somewhere. We saw her come in." Marcus. Mara's blood turned to ice. She looked around frantically. She was in the 3rd floor reference section, surrounded by tall shelves. There was a back stairwell maybe 30 feet away. Ms. Linwood. Marcus's voice was closer now, echoing through the stacks. "I just want to talk. You've been very clever, but you're in over your head. Come out and we can discuss this reasonably." Mara moved silently toward the stairwell, keeping low behind the shelves. Her phone was in her pocket. She could call Ethan, call the police, call. A hand grabbed her arm. She spun, gasping, and found herself face to face with Trevor Marks. He'd circled around through another aisle. "Got her," Trevor called out. Marcus appeared from between the shelves, and Mara's fear crystallized into something else. Anger. "You're trespassing," she said, forcing her voice steady. "This library has cameras. Whatever you're planning." "We're not planning anything," Marcus said smoothly. "Like I said, we just want to talk. You've made some serious accusations, Mara. May I call you Mara? You've accused me and my client of fraud. That's a career-ending mistake for a paralegal. I didn't make accusations. I provided evidence to the SEC. Evidence you stole from my firm. Evidence of crimes you committed." Marcus's pleasant expression flickered. "You're protecting Ethan Beaumont, a man who was investigated for corporate fraud. Who's really the criminal here? You are." Mara pulled her arm free from Trevor's grip. "Both of you. You bribed Trevor, you fabricated evidence, and I can prove all of it. So can Rob Hutchins, who's already given testimony." Trevor's face went pale. "Rob talked? You didn't know?" Mara looked between them. "The SEC has had his full cooperation for 3 months. He told them everything. About the bribes, the conspiracy, the plan to frame Ethan." "You're lying," Marcus snapped. "Am I? Then why did Linda Zhao's attorney just file for immunity last week? Why is the SEC scheduling depositions with every member of Beacon Solar's former board?" Mara took a step forward, and to her satisfaction, Marcus stepped back. "Your conspiracy is falling apart. And Victoria knows it, which is why she sent you to scare me." "Nobody's trying to scare you," Marcus said, but his tone had changed. Less smooth, more desperate. "We're trying to help you understand the situation. You still have a chance to walk away from this. Drop the vendetta against Victoria, stop helping Ethan, and I can make your legal troubles disappear. I don't have legal troubles. You will. Corporate espionage, theft of confidential documents, conspiracy to defame. I can file charges that will follow you for years. Marcus moved closer. Or you can be smart. Take the deal. Start your life over somewhere else. Mara felt her phone vibrating in her pocket. Ethan, probably calling to check in. She needed to get out of here. I'm leaving now, she said. Don't follow me. She moved toward the stairwell, expecting them to stop her. But Marcus just watched, a strange smile on his face. You really care about him, don't you? Marcus called after her. Ethan. This isn't just about justice for you. You've fallen for him. Mara didn't answer. She hit the stairwell and ran down 3 flights, bursting out into the cold night air. Only when she was 2 blocks away, in a well-lit coffee shop, did she call Ethan back. Where are you? He demanded. I've been calling for 20 minutes. Marcus found me at the library. She explained what happened, trying to keep her voice from shaking. I'm coming to get you. Stay in public. Don't move. Ethan, there's something else. I found an email. She told him about Victoria's message to Marcus, the proof of premeditation. There was silence on the other end. Then, send it to Catherine. Right now. And then delete it from your laptop and upload it to a secure server. If they're getting desperate enough to confront you directly, they might try to destroy the evidence. Already done. I sent it to Catherine before they even showed up. Smart. His voice softened. Are you okay? Really? I'm okay. Shaken, but okay. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Mara sat in the coffee shop, hands wrapped around a tea she wasn't drinking, and thought about what Marcus had said. You've fallen for him. Was it true? She'd been so focused on the case, on justice, on righting the wrongs done to Ethan's father the way her own father had been wronged. But somewhere in the past 4 months, something had shifted. She looked forward to their evenings working together. She noticed when he smiled, rare moments of genuine warmth that broke through his grief and anger. She'd started to see not just the fallen billionaire or the victim of fraud, but the man underneath. Brilliant and kind and broken and fighting to put himself back together. And yes, she'd fallen for him. Completely. The question was, what was she going to do about it? The news broke on a Tuesday in March. The Wall Street Journal ran the headline, Renewable Energy CEO faces federal fraud charges in ex-husband's case. By noon, every major outlet had picked up the story. The SEC was bringing civil and criminal charges against Victoria Ashford, Marcus Chen, Linda Zhao, and Chen and Associates for conspiracy to commit securities fraud, falsifying court documents, and corporate espionage. Ethan watched the coverage from Catherine's office, Mara beside him. The U.S. Attorney's Office has issued arrest warrants, the news anchor announced. Sources say the investigation, which began last October, uncovered a sophisticated scheme to defraud Ethan Beaumont, Victoria Ashford's ex-husband and the founder of what is now Ashford Energy Solutions. Footage rolled of Victoria being led from her office building in handcuffs. She kept her head high, refusing to look at the cameras, but Ethan could see the fear in her eyes. Marcus Chen was arrested at his home. The footage showed him arguing with federal agents, his lawyer shouting about improper procedure. Linda Zhao turned herself in after her attorney negotiated surrender terms. How do you feel? Mara asked quietly. Ethan didn't know how to answer. He'd imagined this moment for months, the vindication, the proof that he'd been telling the truth all along. But watching Victoria's arrest, he didn't feel triumphant. He felt empty. I thought I'd feel better, he admitted. Catherine looked up from her phone. The public vindication is just the beginning. Now comes the hard part, recovering your assets and rebuilding your life. What's the timeline? Victoria's criminal trial will take at least a year. But we can file civil suits immediately. With the SEC charges as leverage, I expect Ashford Energy Solutions will want to settle quickly to avoid further damage. Catherine pulled up a document on her computer. I've drafted a settlement proposal. We're asking for full return of patent rights to the Beacon Solar technology, damages equal to the current market value of those patents, approximately $2.3 billion, and a public statement from Ashford Energy Solutions acknowledging the fraud. Ethan stared at the numbers. $2.3 billion. More than he'd lost. Enough to start over, to rebuild. They'll never agree to that, he said. They will if the alternative is a lengthy public trial that destroys their stock price and reputation. Catherine smiled. Corporations care about one thing, protecting shareholder value. Right now, you're a liability they need to eliminate. We make the settlement price high but not impossible, and they'll pay to make you go away. And if they don't? Then we go to court, and with Rob Hutchins and Victoria's emails, we win. They know that. Their attorneys are probably calculating settlement numbers right now. Catherine was right. 5 days later, Ashford Energy Solutions' legal team requested a meeting. The negotiation took place in a conference room in downtown Manhattan. On one side, Ethan, Mara, and Catherine Ross. On the other, a team of 6 attorneys representing Ashford Energy Solutions, plus a visibly furious board member named Richard Sterling who'd taken over as interim CEO after Victoria's arrest. Let's be clear about what we're discussing, Sterling said without preamble. Your settlement proposal is absurd. $2.3 billion in damages, plus return of patents. That would bankrupt the company. The company that was built on stolen assets, Catherine countered. Assets fraudulently obtained from my client. Allegedly fraudulently obtained. The criminal charges haven't been proven yet. Would you like to wait for the trial? Because I'm happy to let this play out in court. Catherine leaned back. Of course, every day of a trial means more media coverage. More investors asking questions. More stock price declines. How much has Ashford Energy Solutions lost in market cap since the arrests? $2 billion. 3. Sterling's jaw tightened. What's your bottom line? Catherine glanced at Ethan, who nodded. Here's the deal, Catherine said. Return full ownership of all patents and intellectual property originally developed by Beacon Solar Industries to Mr. Beaumont. Make a public statement acknowledging that the assets were obtained through fraudulent means. Pay damages of $800 million. And agree to a non-compete clause preventing Ashford Energy Solutions from using any Beacon Solar technology for 5 years. That's still too high. It's 65% less than our opening position. And it's non-negotiable. Catherine stood. You have 48 hours to accept or we proceed to trial. The negotiations continued for 3 more weeks, but eventually, the settlement was reached, patents returned, $750 million in damages, and a public acknowledgement of the fraud. The day the settlement was signed, Ethan stood outside the courthouse with Mara, surrounded by cameras and reporters. Mr. Beaumont, how does it feel to be vindicated? A reporter shouted. Ethan thought about everything that had led to this moment. The motel room. The bankruptcy hearing. Mara stepping forward with evidence. The months of investigation. The threats. The fear. It feels like the truth finally came out, he said. That's all I ever wanted. What's next for you? Ethan looked at Mara, who smiled encouragingly. I'm going to rebuild, he said. Not the same company, but something new. Something better. 6 months after the settlement, Ethan stood in an empty office building in Boulder, Colorado, watching sunrise through floor-to-ceiling windows. It wasn't Manhattan. It wasn't the glass tower where Beacon Solar had been headquartered. But it was clean and bright and full of possibility. The contractors say they can have the lab space ready in 3 weeks, Mara said, coming up beside him with 2 cups of coffee. And we've got 12 engineers confirmed to start next month. Ethan took the coffee, savoring the moment. They'd spent the last 6 months carefully planning the launch of Aurora Energy, his new company, focused on next-generation solar technology that improved on everything he developed at Beacon Solar. With the settlement money and recovered patents, Ethan had resources. But more importantly, he had something he'd lacked at Beacon Solar: clarity about who to trust. The Aurora Energy team was small but brilliant. Engineers who'd worked with Ethan before and had never believed the fraud charges. Scientists eager to push renewable energy technology forward. And Mara, who'd turned out to have a remarkable talent for operations management despite having no formal training. "Have you decided on the COO position?" Mara asked. They'd been interviewing candidates for weeks. Ethan needed someone to handle day-to-day operations while he focused on product development and technology strategy. "Actually, I have," Ethan said. "I want to offer it to you." Mara nearly dropped her coffee. "What? You've been managing this entire startup process. Negotiating with contractors, recruiting staff, handling the legal formation, setting up supply chains." Ethan turned to face her. "You're already doing the job, Mara. I just want to make it official." "Ethan, I'm not qualified. I don't have an MBA. I've never run a company. Neither had I when I started Beacon Solar. I was 23 years old with an engineering degree and a crazy idea." He smiled. "You're the smartest person I know. You're organized, you're ethical, you work harder than anyone. And I trust you completely. That's more important than any MBA." Mara was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the mountains in the distance. "Okay," she said finally. "Yes. I'll do it." "Yeah? Yeah." She grinned. "But I'm going to need a significant raise from what you're currently paying me. You're currently working for free." "Exactly. Significant raise." They both laughed, and Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine happiness. Over the next 3 months, Aurora Energy took shape. The lab equipment arrived. The engineers started work on prototypes. Ethan threw himself into the technical challenges with an intensity he'd forgotten he possessed. But something was different this time. At Beacon Solar, he'd been so consumed by ambition that he'd missed what was happening in his personal life: Victoria's betrayal, his board's disloyalty, the conspiracy forming right under his nose. Now, he paid attention. He had coffee with his team every morning. He listened when people raised concerns. He built a culture of transparency and trust. And he noticed Mara. He noticed how she lit up when solving a complex logistics problem. How she stayed late not because she had to, but because she genuinely cared about the work. How she'd transformed from the nervous paralegal in the courtroom to a confident leader who could negotiate with suppliers and inspire the staff. He noticed that when she laughed, his whole day felt brighter. He noticed that he was falling in love with her. It happened on a Saturday in September. The team had been working 16-hour days to prepare for Aurora Energy's first product demo for investors. Everyone was exhausted, and Ethan had ordered everyone to take the weekend off. Everyone had left except Mara, who was in her office reviewing the pitch deck one more time. "You're supposed to be resting," Ethan said from her doorway. She looked up, surprised. "So are you." "I was going to take a walk. Clear my head before Monday." He hesitated. "Want to come?" They walked through Boulder's downtown, past coffee shops and bookstores, eventually ending up at a park near the creek. It was a perfect autumn evening: cool air, golden light, leaves just starting to turn. They sat on a bench near the water, not talking, just existing in comfortable silence. "Can I ask you something?" Mara said eventually. "Anything. Do you ever regret it? Fighting back, I mean. You could have just signed the bankruptcy papers and disappeared. Started over somewhere quiet. Instead, you chose war." Ethan considered the question. "I regret the time it took. The stress it put on everyone, including you. But do I regret fighting? No. Some things are worth fighting for. Truth. Justice. Self-respect." He looked at her. "You taught me that, actually." Me? You risked everything to show me that clause. You didn't have to. You could have stayed silent, kept your job, avoided all of this. But you chose to fight for what was right, even when it cost you everything. Ethan turned to face her fully. You're the bravest person I've ever met, Mara. She was blushing now, looking down at her hands. I just did what my dad would have wanted. No. You did what you believed was right. That's different. He reached over and gently took her hand. I need to tell you something. Mara looked up, her eyes wide behind her glasses. I'm in love with you, Ethan said. I think I've been in love with you since the courthouse, when you stood up and refused to let injustice happen. I just didn't let myself acknowledge it because everything was so complicated. But it's not complicated anymore. Or maybe it is, and I don't care. He squeezed her hand. You saved my life, Mara. And then you helped me build a new one. And I want you in that life, not just as a business partner, but as, more. Mara was crying, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, Ethan said quickly. I shouldn't have, this is too much, too fast. No. Mara was laughing through her tears. No, you idiot. I'm crying because I've been in love with you for months, and I was terrified you only saw me as a colleague. Or worse, that you were still in love with Victoria. God, no. Victoria was a mistake I made when I was too young to know better. You're the woman I choose now, with full knowledge of who I am and who you are. Mara leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft and sweet and perfect, and when they broke apart, they were both smiling. So, Mara said. We're doing this? Starting a relationship on top of starting a company? Terrible timing, Ethan agreed. Definitely going to complicate things at work. Absolutely. We should probably wait until after the investor demo. Probably. They kissed again, longer this time. Or, Mara said breathlessly, we could just be honest with the team and deal with whatever complications arise. I like that plan better. Victoria's criminal trial began in November. Ethan didn't attend every day, but he was there for the important moments. Rob Hutchins' testimony, where he detailed the conspiracy from the inside. The forensic accountant who traced Victoria's bribes to board members. The FBI agent who explained how Victoria and Marcus had created fraudulent offshore accounts in Ethan's name. Victoria's defense tried to claim she'd been manipulated by Marcus, that she hadn't fully understood the legal implications of his actions. But the emails Mara had found destroyed that narrative. Victoria had been the architect, not a pawn. The prosecution's closing argument was devastating. This wasn't a crime of passion or a mistake made in the heat of anger, the prosecutor told the jury. This was a calculated, years-long conspiracy to destroy another human being. Victoria Ashford looked into the eyes of the man she'd married, the man she'd built a life with, and decided that his success was worth less than her ambition. She stole his company. She stole his reputation. She nearly stole his future. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When the verdict came back, guilty on all counts, Ethan felt a weight lift that he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. Victoria was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Marcus Chin got 12 years for his role as the legal architect of the fraud. Outside the courthouse, Ethan gave a brief statement to the press. This was never about revenge, he said. It was about the truth. About making sure that fraud and betrayal don't go unpunished. About believing that justice, even when it's slow, eventually prevails. A reporter shouted, "What would you say to Victoria now?" Ethan thought about it. "I'd say thank you." The reporters looked shocked. "Thank you for showing me who you really were," Ethan continued. "Thank you for teaching me that success means nothing if it's built on lies. And thank you for getting out of my life, because it led me to people who actually deserve my trust and love." He looked over at Mara, who was waiting by their car, and smiled. Aurora Energy's first investor demo took place on a cold December morning. The auditorium was packed with venture capitalists, energy industry executives, and journalists. Ethan stood backstage, adjusting his tie nervously. "You've got this," Mara said, straightening his collar. "You've given 1,000 presentations before." "Not for a long time. And never with this much writing on it." "Then don't think of it as a presentation. Think of it as telling a story." She smiled. "The story of how renewable energy can actually change the world, not just be a talking point for politicians." Ethan kissed her forehead. "How did I ever function without you?" "Poorly, from what I understand." He laughed, and then it was time. Ethan walked onto the stage, and the nerves fell away. This was what he loved, explaining how technology could solve real problems. Making people excited about the future. 7 years ago, I founded Beacon Solar Industries with a simple goal, he began. Make renewable energy efficient enough and affordable enough to replace fossil fuels everywhere. We made progress. But we didn't get far enough. He clicked to the next slide, showing Aurora Energy's new solar panel design. This is the next generation. Panels that are 40% more efficient than anything currently on the market. That cost half as much to manufacture. That lasts twice as long. With this technology, solar energy doesn't just compete with fossil fuels, it dominates. The presentation continued for 40 minutes. Ethan walked through the technical innovations, the business model, the market projections. And he was honest about the challenges ahead, scaling production, competing with established players, navigating regulatory hurdles. When he finished, there was a moment of silence. Then the applause started. Not polite investor applause, but genuine excitement. The Q&A session ran over by 30 minutes because investors kept asking detailed questions. By the end, Aurora Energy had commitments for $400 million in series of funding. Backstage, Mara threw her arms around Ethan. "You did it," she said. "You actually did it." "We did it," he corrected. "This was never just me." That evening, the Aurora Energy team celebrated at a restaurant downtown. Ethan watched his engineers debating technical specifications, his operations team planning the production scale-up, and Mara coordinating everything with easy confidence. This was what he'd been missing at Beacon Solar, a team that genuinely believed in the mission, not just the money. People who trusted each other. A culture built on honesty instead of ambition. Late in the evening, Ethan stepped outside for air. Mara joined him a moment later. "Tired?" she asked. "Exhausted." "Happy?" "Me too." She leaned against him. "I was thinking about something. About how we got here." "Yeah? If Victoria hadn't betrayed you, we never would have met. You'd still be running Beacon Solar. I'd still be filing papers at Marcus's firm. We'd have passed each other on the street and never known what we were missing." Ethan put his arm around her. "Are you saying I should thank Victoria again?" "No. I'm saying that sometimes the worst things lead to the best things. And I'm grateful for wherever we ended up, even if the journey was terrible. I'm grateful too." Ethan tilted her chin up and kissed her. "For you. For this second chance. For everything." 2 years later. The Forbes magazine cover showed Ethan and Mara standing in front of Aurora Energy's new headquarters, a gleaming building powered entirely by their own solar technology. The headline read, "The Comeback, How Ethan Beaumont and Mara Linwood Built a Billion-Dollar Company from the Ashes of Betrayal." Inside, the article detailed Aurora Energy's meteoric rise. Their solar panels were now installed in homes and businesses across North America. They'd secured contracts with 3 major utility companies. Their stock, which had gone public 6 months ago, had tripled in value. But the article also told the personal story. The courtroom moment when Mara found the courage to speak up. The investigation that exposed Victoria's conspiracy. The slow rebuilding of trust and hope. "What's it like," the reporter had asked, "running a company with someone you're in a romantic relationship with?" Ethan and Mara had looked at each other and laughed. "Complicated," Mara said. "Wonderful," Ethan added. "We argue about strategy sometimes," Mara explained. We disagree about priorities. But we trust each other completely. And that makes everything else work. The interview had ended with the question, any advice for other entrepreneurs? Ethan had thought carefully before answering. Success isn't about how high you climb, he said. It's about who's climbing with you. I learned that the hard way. I built my first company with people who didn't share my values, and it cost me everything. Aurora Energy is different because it's built on trust, transparency, and a genuine mission to make the world better. That foundation is worth more than any amount of money. Now, standing in their office as the sun set over Boulder, Ethan read the article one more time before setting it aside. What do you think? Mara asked, coming up behind him and wrapping her arms around his waist. I think we've come a long way from that courthouse. Do you ever miss the old life? The billions, the Manhattan penthouse, the private jets? No. Ethan turned to face her. I was miserable in that life, even before Victoria's betrayal. I was so focused on building an empire that I forgot why I started. Money became the goal instead of the mission. He cupped her face in his hands. This life, working with people I trust, building something meaningful, coming home to you every night, this is better than anything I had before. Even though we're taking the bus instead of a private jet? We have a Tesla. A used Tesla. It's very reliable. Mara laughed and kissed him. I love you, Ethan Beaumont. I love you too, Mara Beaumont. She froze. Beaumont? Ethan pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it, revealing a simple diamond ring. I was going to do this at a fancy restaurant, he said. Plan some elaborate proposal. But then I thought, we've never been about fancy or elaborate. We're about real moments and honest feelings. He got down on one knee. Mara Linwood, you saved my life when I had nothing left. You fought beside me when everyone else walked away. You built a company with me from scratch. And you loved me when I was broken and helped me become whole again. Will you marry me? Mara was crying again, happy tears this time. Yes, she said. Yes, absolutely yes. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. Through the window, they could see the city lights coming on, and in the distance, the mountains that had witnessed their entire journey. They'd come to this city as refugees from injustice, carrying nothing but evidence of fraud and the determination to fight back. They'd rebuilt their lives piece by piece. They'd created something new and better from the ruins of betrayal. And they'd found love in the process, not the passionate but fragile love of youth, but the steady, tested love that comes from standing together through the worst and choosing each other anyway. What do we do now? Mara asked. Ethan smiled. We keep building. We keep fighting for what matters. We keep being honest with each other and the world. He kissed her softly. And we live happily ever after. You know that's not how real life works, right? Maybe not. But after everything we've survived, I think we've earned a little happiness. Fair enough. Mara grinned. In that case, yes. Let's live happily ever after. And against all odds, they did.